Welcome back. This is a mini-series showing you how I prepare for a general aviation flight. In this video, I'll talk you through how I produce my plog or pilot's log. This is a vital document that sits on my kneeboard in the cockpit telling me about my headings, distances and times. If you haven't seen part 1 of this series, you might want to go and take a look at that now. In that video I show you how I create my route, a journey from Biggin Hill to Sherburn in Elmet near Leeds. Having created that route, we can now generate the plog. So here is the route shown on my CAA chart, showing the black line, the route going through Luton, Cranfield, Northampton, and then over the page up past Leicester, East Midlands, and so on and so forth. So now we've got that created on our map, we can create our plog. Now creating your plog is really easy if you make use of software such as SkyDemon, for example. It's a VFR software and you can put your route in it. You see me create that in my first video, and it automatically creates your plog for you, calculating the distances, doing all the calculations according to the wind speed and direction on the day, and then the times it's going to take you to go from one to the other. It'll even tell you how much fuel you're going to need. So it's absolutely fantastic, and more often than not these days that is what I default to. I will look at SkyDemon and I will let it generate the plog, and then I will simply write it out onto a piece of paper that I'll keep on my knee pad. If you want to, it can print out a plog for you. But what I'm going to show you today is perhaps the old school method, and this will be the method that you'll be learning or will be expected to be able to do if you're doing your pilot's license, for example. So here we have on our map our route taking us northeasterly from Swanley to the waypoint at Baker, then north towards Brentwood and left towards Banbury Reservoir. Now what we do is, first of all, we need our blank plog, and here is one that I have created here. Now I did this on a spreadsheet. You're very welcome to use this if you want. You can download this and also my communications sheet from the frequently asked questions page on my website. And what the plog consists of, various columns. Firstly, we've got the from and to columns, so these are the different waypoints that you're going to fill in. We've got a minimum safe altitude box, our planned altitude box, that's the actual altitude that we're expecting to fly at, our true airspeed, our track true, our wind direction and velocity goes in this column, our heading true goes in here, which we will calculate using the wind velocity, and then our heading magnetic. The heading magnetic being the heading that we will fly based on what our compass is showing us. Then we've got our ground speed column here, then our distance column, then our time column, our ETA and our actual time of arrival. And over here on the right you can see I've got a fuel column. This shows us how many litres of fuel I'm carrying at the start of the flight and the amount of time, my endurance that I have with using that fuel. And then down these columns here I write in the times that I switch tanks, so I know how much fuel I've used during the course of the journey. And then at the bottom of the plog here I've got a big space here where I can write all my clearances. So the first thing we do is we take our map, and on our plog we will scribble down the first part of the route. So we're going to be going from Biggin Hill to Alkin to Baker, and then it's Baker to Brentwood, to Banbury Reservoir. Okay, now of course we would carry on populating this list with all of the waypoints on our journey, and you may need 2 sheets in order to do that. So the next thing we do is we calculate our distances on our map here. So our first waypoint is from Biggin Hill to Alkin, and looking at my map here, it shows that it's 7 nautical miles. So on our sheet here we write 7 nautical miles. Then we go from Alkin to Baker, and that's showing 8 nautical miles. So then we fill in the next column on here, 8 nautical miles. Then Baker to Brentwood, that's 5.5 nautical miles. And finally, Brentwood to Banbury Reservoir is 13 nautical miles. The next thing we do is we need to know what our headings are going to be. And we start off by working out what the true headings are going to be, because our map here is in degrees true, not degrees magnetic. It's all very complicated. So we use one of these, which is a plotter. And what it is a normal ruler, but it's got this little rotatable compass on the top. So what we do is we take our plotter and we make sure that the ruler is aligned with our track. Then we rotate the rotatable card until north is facing northwards, and we can see some graticule lines on the map, and we line up this compass here, the lines on the compass, with the lines on the map, and we can see, if we read off the compass here, that the true track going that way is 060 degrees true. So now, having worked that out as 060 degrees, we write that in the track true column, and we go on finding the headings for each of the legs. 036 degrees for the next one, 036. Brentwood to Baker looks northerly, but we'll just check. Yep, it's exactly north, so 000. And then finally Brentwood to Banbury Reservoir, 287 degrees. Now I've done that really quickly. If I was doing this for real, I'd make sure I've got loads of room, loads of light, and really carefully put this plotter on the line, make sure it lines up perfectly with the graticule lines on the map, because it is very easy to be 1 or 2 degrees out. Another error that you can make, of course, is that you might have the compass round the wrong way, or you may have it pointing that way when you intended it to point north, and then you get a completely different true heading than you obviously wanted. So be very careful. I now need to turn those true tracks into magnetic headings, taking account of what the wind is doing at the altitude I intend to fly. I get the wind forecast from the Met Office website, and specifically the F214 form, the spot wind chart. These charts show forecast wind direction and velocities across the UK at various levels for the period selected. For my flight to Sherburn in Elmet, the chart suggests the average wind direction and speed will be 300 degrees at 25 knots at 2,000 feet. So we'll write that in our column here, 300 degrees, 25 knots. Now this is an approximation, of course, this is a forecast. The actual wind speed will be different probably in the plane, but this will give us a starting point, because when we start flying these legs, we will be able to see what our wind is doing to our track, and we may need to make corrections as we go along. But this gives us something to begin with. Now, how we work out what our heading is going to have to be based on this wind, we use one of these, which is called a flight computer. It doesn't look much like a computer, it looks more like a slide rule. In fact, it is pretty much a slide rule. So I'm not going to go into this in detail, because you will learn this obviously if you're going through flying school. But basically what you do is you use this column here to set your airspeed. Now I usually fly at 100 knots or thereabouts. Then what you do is you turn this inner column here round to the wind direction that the wind is doing, 300 there. Now I'm going to use what's called the wind markdown method. So on here I'm going to apply the 25 knot wind. So I count down 10, 20, 25 will be 75 knots. I'll draw a line there and a line there to mark a cross. And then what you do is you look at your plog and you say, right, the track from Biggin to Alkin was track true 060. So then I turn 060 on the flight computer, and we can see that the cross is now 11 degrees to the right. So we then turn the computer 11 degrees to the right, like so, and look at it again, and it's now saying 12 degrees. So we then move it another 1 degree to the right to make it 12, and look at it, and it's more or less on 12. So it's going to be our actual heading that we need to fly. Our true heading is 048 degrees. We then need to apply the magnetic variation. I know it's shown on your map, but I know that it is 0 at Biggin Hill, so our magnetic heading will be 048 degrees as well. Obviously, if there was a magnetic variation at the point in your route, and it will vary as you cut across the country, you'll need to apply the magnetic variation. That's how much the compass will vary depending on where you are in the country. So now, having worked out our heading, we need to work out what our ground speed is going to be, and from our ground speed we can then work out how long it's going to take us to do that leg of the journey. So we go back to our flight computer for that, and we see where the cross is lined up on the speed line. We can see it showing 110. So we can write in our plog on the ground speed column here, we can write 110. Now, having worked out what our ground speed is, we now need to work out how long it's going to take us to do those 7 miles that we have on our plog. The other side of the flight computer will show us how to do that. So turn it over, we've got a completely different system here. So it looks pretty clever, doesn't it? So here on this column here, we mark our ground speed. So we said it was 110, so we put it on the 11 mark here. With this little line, we turn it to our distance, which in this case is going to be 7 nautical miles. And then off the bottom line, this will tell us how long it will take us to do that journey. And that says it's going to take 3.75 minutes. We'll call it 4 minutes. So I mark that on my plog. So there you are. We've completed one column of our plog. There are probably another 10 or so to go for the whole journey. It may look like a marathon, but actually once you get the hang of it, you can do this quite quickly. I suspect I could probably work this route out in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to finish now the first section of this route, these first 5 waypoints, quickly get those done, and then we'll move on to the next stage. So there we are. It took me another minute or two just to complete the rest of my plog, and these will be the headings that I fly for each leg of the journey. This will be the ground speed that I'm expecting for that leg of the journey. These were the distances that we measured, and these will be the times. So as I'm going along, I'm noting the time at which I arrive at certain waypoints, and then I estimate how long it's going to take me to get to my next waypoint, so that if I should ever get lost or I can't see where I am, I know that I'm expecting to arrive at that waypoint at a particular time if I've carried on heading at the heading that I've set course on here. It seems very old-fashioned, but it works very, very well indeed. One final thing to do before you run off to the plane and fly this route is just check you haven't made any silly mistakes. It's called a gross error check, and it's where you look at the tracks and the headings that you've drawn and make sure there aren't any blinding errors. You haven't got things transposed back to front, because the last thing you want to do is get in the plane and blindly fly these headings, and you may have introduced some massive error as you were working on this plog. The final step in producing your plog involves working out the minimum safe altitudes for each leg of the route. You check along your journey for the elevation figures and obstacles and come up with a minimum altitude you can safely and legally fly. This is crucial, of course, for IFR flight. So there you are. That's a very, very brief introduction to how we create our plog, our pilot's log. In our next episode, we'll be looking at weight and balance, how we calculate our performance figures, how much runway we need, also how much fuel we're going to need to carry, and working out which frequencies and controllers we're going to want to speak to en route. Don't forget that in the final episode we'll see how all this work comes together as I fly the route for real in the PA-28. I'll be releasing a new episode in this mini-series every Saturday. If the next episode has not already been released and you want to watch it now, it's available to my early bird subscribers on PayPal and Patreon. Click here for details.